Hi everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of SECED Talks. I'm Evangelos Fandidis, and today I'm here with two of my fellow committee members, Filip Zinkiewicz and Mark Skorer. And in this episode, Mark is going to share his experience from the SARAID rescue mission in Turkey after the devastating earthquake events that took place early on this year.
Good morning, Mark. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Before we start, could you please briefly introduce yourself to our listeners and share your involvement in the SARAID rescue charity?
Good morning, both, and thank you for having me on this podcast. My name is Mark Skorer, as you said, and I've been with SARAID for over 10 years now as a charity. I first joined back in 2012 after a colleague of mine in work shared a lunchtime presentation, Ian Turner, who talked about his experience recently in Haiti, where the team deployed in 2010, and from an engineering perspective of how I could use my skills and apply those to do something good. So I joined back 2012 and got involved with a colleague of mine in the charity in developing the engineering capability and growing the team from that perspective. Went on a number of deployments following disasters in Nepal in 2015, then with the UK government in 2016 to Ecuador following the Mujne earthquake. Then we had deployments with SARAID to the Beirut explosion, where whilst not deploying in country because of COVID restrictions, myself was heading up the UK point of contact with another engineer, Josh Makabuag. Then I led an engineering assessment team to Albania following the earthquakes in 2019, I believe. And again, the team deployed to Haiti in 2021 following the earthquake then. So over the past 6 or 7 years, there have been reasonably regular deployments that the team have had to respond to. And during that time, I've held various positions within the charity, from an engineering training officer to the international development officer as well, and then recently taken over this year as the operations director for the charity.
Okay, that's quite impressive. With such a significant experience in post-disaster urban rescue, I'm curious, what was your initial reaction to the media reports when you first heard about the earthquake in Turkey? Did you immediately know that you and your team would be deployed?
I think you get a feeling very early on. I was woken up just after sort of 6. There were some messages on my phone. We have an alert system where you receive text messages when major incidents occur around the world. So the same happened just this weekend with a number of incidents in Afghanistan and Papua New Guinea. But the Turkey one was slightly different. There was also a missed call that I had from Sky News asking for me to provide opinion on the incidents and situation developing in Turkey. Having seen the magnitude of the earthquake and the time that it occurred, obviously with people in their houses and sleeping, it's quite a serious one. And that was obviously amplified by the second major event happening shortly 9 hours after the first. So from a very early stage, we had a feeling that SARAID may well be requested to respond to this incident, and seeing the pictures and how things unfolded, you could see the level of destruction and the situation that would need a lot of support.
You mentioned expecting that SARAID might be asked for assistance. Could you please clarify what does it mean? Does it imply that you don't undertake any missions independently, but rather need to be requested by the government of the affected country or any national rescue authority?
Absolutely. So SARAID is a United Nations classified urban search and rescue team, a USAR team that they specialize in. And that classification requires the charity to go through a significant assessment by trainees from all over the world, which SARAID was assessed in last September at the Fire Service College in Morton-on-Marsh in the UK. Following successful completion of that exercise, SARAID operates within the UN International Search and Advisory Group called SARAID. They have a set level of standards, ways to communicate, ways to respond to such events. In the instance of a damaging disaster, the host country may well engage with the International Search and Rescue Group and put out a request for international assistance. Only when that request goes out will SARAID respond. We may offer our assistance directly via the embassy or government means, but it will always be at the request and acceptance of the host country. We never deploy just because we think they need help. The country's sovereignty is key, and we need to go there at their request and help facilitate the rescue efforts that they are enacting as a national body.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Could you also please explain how did you and your team manage to prepare for the mission and get there in time?
Absolutely, preparation is one of the key aspects as a charity and as a quick response that's required. So the team train on a monthly basis and live permanently in a state of readiness that they could be called out 24/7, 365 days a year. So the majority of the kit is packed and ready. Batteries are on charge. Generators are unfilled and in a clean state, so as to be flight ready. The boxes and kits, of which there are numerous, I think we took over 70 pieces of baggage to Turkey, and upwards of sort of 30 kgs per box, all need to be manifested and ready to move at a sort of hour's notice. We try to be deployable within sort of 12 to 24 hours, depending on the location, depending on when the request for assistance comes out. The team mobilise very quickly. We have internal communication systems to generate meetings and requests where people who are available, because we're a voluntary organisation, not everyone is always available. People have lives that they lead that go on in the background and commitments that not everybody can always get out of, and we understand that. But very quickly, within a few hours, waking up that morning on the Monday, we were having meetings to discuss potential team compositions and who might be able to respond and fly out that Monday evening.
Yeah, so having done quick maths, 70 piece of luggage times 30 kilograms is over 2 tons. How did you manage to bring it to the airport and deal with the airlines? And was it even possible after such event to book ordinary flight tickets to get into the disaster zone?
So yes, it's a good question. The logistics of moving 20 plus people plus 2 tons of kit is not a small logistical task. Our kit is based in Yate Fire Station, just outside Bristol, where we work closely with the fire service and they provide us the use of that facility, which is fantastic. We had minibuses and team members who were not able to deploy, but were able to respond and support from the UK, able to help transport and check the kit up to Stansted, where we ultimately flew out of. We work with a charity partner in the United States called Airlink, who are able to provide flights on certain occasions free of charge, donated by other benefactors, which is a great service to SARAID, given that we're a voluntary organisation that need to fundraise for every pound the charity gets and spends. So in liaison with those, they were able to help arrange flights. They were regular flights purchased via Pegasus Airways, and Pegasus, which is a Turkish national airline, were fantastic and were able to provide complimentary excess baggage, which again was a fantastic support. The ground staff in Stansted were amazingly helpful to support us to get through the security in a timely fashion with all our equipment. And again, at the other end, we flew into Istanbul, then on to Adana. Again, both ends, the ground staff from Pegasus, helping sort out the flight logistics and the excess baggage, and then back when we ultimately arrived back in Stansted to help move this, were unbelievably helpful, and thanks go out to them for facilitating the mission.
That's really good to know. It looks like SARAID has a strong network, and a lot of people and authorities were willing to help you with your mission. So, what exactly happened when you first arrived to the field, and how did you exactly manage to coordinate with local people and authorities when you were in a mission on the field?
So, when the team landed in country, in Adana, as per the United Nations guidelines and standards that we train to, along with the other classified teams, we were met by a reception and departure centre in the airport. So the first teams incoming, with the support of the national country, set up this reception and departure centre, which helps to receive and coordinate all the international incoming teams. Ultimately, there were over 80 teams that deployed to Turkey following the events, with close to, I think, 10,000 international rescue personnel that were coming into the country. And as you can imagine, that needs a fair amount of coordination and logistical support. It was impressive what the Turkish government were able to provide us with. On arrival, we were provided with vehicles and translators to then provide transport on to Kahramanmaraş, where we were tasked with working first. We left two of the team that flew out on the second wave on the Tuesday or the Wednesday from SARAID to help staff and run the reception and departure centre, because SARAID is also trained in the logistical response and management of that. So we had two team members working in Adana Airport to help coordinate all subsequent international teams for the duration of the mission as well. We were then provided a police escort as well to help expedite our transfer to Kahramanmaraş, which ended up taking probably 7 or 8 hours, ultimately, which is usually only a couple of hours drive, but due to the congestion, the damage to the roads and the bridges that we observed, obviously things were a bit slow. But we ultimately arrived in Kahramanmaraş, where we were teaming up with another light USAR team, colleagues from AtFire in Germany that we'd worked with before and have a good relationship with. We were tasked with working closely with them, and we linked up with them in the early evening on what was now the Wednesday.
So, with over 10,000 rescuers on the field, and along with local residents and victims, I imagine that securing accommodation must have been quite challenging. How was this managed? And did you arrange the accommodation by yourself, independently? Or was it provided by the Turkish authority that requested your assistance?
So again, the main purpose and aim of the search and rescue teams is, one, to provide that search and rescue assistance, but secondly, and of almost equal importance, is that they shouldn't be an additional burden on the host country. We are not there to take away any of the resources that are required for those impacted directly by the disaster. So when SARAID deploys, it's completely self-sufficient for typically 2 weeks or the duration of the mission. We take our own tents, we travel with our own water and our own food, and therefore at no point do we need to take those resources away from the host country. In the UN system, what will be identified early on is what's called a base of operations, an area coordinated again with the host government and in an area that's safe and secure for all of the international teams to camp effectively. So that base of operations was just outside Kahramanmaraş in a secure area, and despite the cold temperatures, just down to sort of -10 that the locals were obviously having to endure, the team set up in this area so they could coordinate and function from that as a base of operations.
And was the decision to use tents for your temporary accommodation made due to the risk of aftershocks, or was it simply because tents are just the quickest way to set up a camp in a disaster zone?
Both. To be honest, you're right there. There's the risk of aftershocks, and obviously tents are the safest as long as they're away from structures there. And also they're more lightweight, easy to travel in. We can be mobile, we can be quick, we can set up, be flexible, adaptable. And again, it's not taking any of the potential resources away from those in most need of it.
Thank you, Mark. That looks to be a very challenging mission when it requires the right skills and, of course, expertise. So could you please explain how your team's skills and expertise contribute directly to the rescue efforts?
Sure. So I think, as I mentioned before, that the team train once a month for a weekend all year, and also participate in additional exercise weekends, both in the UK and abroad. Just this year, some of the team have participated in exercises in Kosovo with multiple other European rescue teams, and also most recently, just a couple of weekends ago, just outside Paris, with At Fire, the German team, and their annual exercise. So the team train hard and to maintain and develop the necessary skills. That includes anything from logistics, camp management, base of operations, water purification, communications, functioning within the UN infrastructure and coordination system. Then in terms of the more urban search and rescue related activities, there are a number of different search levels, from a large wide area search down to full detailed sort of breaching and breaking through concrete and into the structures to extricate potential victims. There's a lot of skill sets required for this, understanding collapse mechanisms, the engineering side of things, understanding the residual load paths, how best to prop and shore, how to construct those props and shores out of either mechanical systems if they're available, or wood, hammer, nails, constructing those. Then using highly sensitive listening equipment to perform technical searches, using 360-degree cameras to enter voids to see if people can be detected, and then how you break and breach through concrete, brickwork, all the sorts of things that are there, radiators, cupboards that are encountered in collapsed structures, and then how to extricate the casualties, packaging up. We have medics well trained in USAR medicine, how to treat crush injuries, things like that. So as a collective, the team is very well trained and has to maintain that training on a monthly basis to make sure they're ready to deploy when needed.
Thank you, Mark. You emphasize the importance of understanding the collapse mechanism in search and rescue missions. Could you please share what types of building damage you observed most frequently?
Yes, of course. There was a number of different mechanisms for collapse. Buildings can, due to just completely disintegrating into a rubble pile with almost little or no opportunity for survivable voids, to pancake collapse, where you see perhaps the first floor soft story that collapses on top of each other, again with limited, but there are instances where certainly people find survivable voids within pancake collapses, whether it's under beds, under tables, within wardrobes. Then you get your classic sort of A-frame collapse, where one side of the floor slab or the roof slab collapses, and you get sort of either double an A-frame or tilt or lean-to collapses, where obviously that forms a triangular space where potential survivable voids could be found. And typically, you'll find all different types of collapse patterns in an impacted disaster. And that was the case again for Turkey to varying degrees. The level of infrastructure and materials used always varies from from the central CBD districts where you may have more RC frame buildings with infill that have collapsed. Some modern buildings, obviously built to code, some older buildings that have been modified, shall we say, and built upon as people obtain more money, and so ad hoc, perhaps not designed, perhaps older buildings not designed to the latest seismic codes. So you always get a variety, and each one poses its own challenges.
Could you please explain how do you classify the collapsed buildings around in terms of prioritizing where to go first and where the chances of finding trapped survivors are the highest? And additionally, once you enter a specific collapsed building, what's your approach? Do you follow any approved checklist or specific set of procedures once you get there?
Okay, so on the ground, once arrived in country, there is a coordination centre in each location called a USAR coordination cell, the UCC. And in terms of the magnitude of the disaster in Turkey, that required a total of 10 smaller UCCs termed sector coordination cells. So there were 10 individual coordination hubs called SECED that were spread across Turkey, and these were of significant distances apart. They weren't all in the same city. For comparison, Nepal had potentially 2 only, one in Kathmandu to coordinate the teams, and then another closer to the epicenter in Gorkha, where they set up a sub-coordination cell there. So I think you can see just from the sheer magnitude that Turkey was significantly greater in its impact. These coordination cells were tasked with interfacing closely with AFAD, the Turkish Local Emergency Management Authority, to prioritize and task the international response teams with where they needed to go within the city of Kahramanmaraş in terms of our SCC. So we would be tasked by the SCC, who in turn would have close coordination with AFAD, highlighting what they perceive to be their priorities. This could be from emergency calls from residents knowing that their house or their neighbour's house had collapsed and they could hear voices or they could hear noises or tapping. And so these taskings we would be given on a daily basis. We would turn up to the coordinates or the addresses. Sometimes these were hard to pinpoint exactly, following the level of collapse in areas where it was almost just collapsed building and collapsed buildings and no obvious streets existed. But on arrival on the ground, there as deputy team leader, it was my responsibility to coordinate the rescue efforts on the ground for the team. So we would turn up, we would try to implement some sort of safe working cordon around the site. We would undertake a 360-degree survey with some of the team members, including what we'd appoint as a health and safety person, and we'd have an engineer to circle the collapsed structure, to make notes, sketch out, observe hazards, potential utilities, potential risks to the environment and to future rescue efforts. So once we'd assessed from the outside, we would very quickly start determining what the best approach was to try to get a better understanding of the situation. That could be helped by local knowledge, whether neighbours, standard passers-by had heard tapping from a certain location. It might be through the use of search dogs that whilst SARAID doesn't currently have, we were utilising others on the ground there, and we currently have a MOU with a Northern Ireland search dog rescue team that we were training with in France recently that we're looking to be able to mobilise in the future, because working with search dogs can be another great tool to help locate potential casualties. So if search dogs have been passed over, or it might be the need to use that highly specialised listening equipment, what's known as a DELSAR, which is effectively a stethoscope, a highly tuned stethoscope with acoustic sensors or seismic sensors that can be laid across the rubble pile and listened to for a response to tapping or scraping or voices. Once a location is identified, it might be that we need to drill through walls, through areas, break through concrete, through bricks, through plasterboard to try to get a better image of what's going on inside the building. We then use the 360 first look camera, of which we used extensively on the first rescue in Turkey, and it enabled us to get an extended view inside. It has listening capabilities, so we could hear the trapped casualty, respond to them. We could pass water through to the casualty and reassure them that help was on the way. And so that, as the scenario develops, we're constantly reassessing the situation from a health and safety perspective, the potential for aftershocks, and how we would get out or stabilize the structure to allow the team to get in and extricate the casualty. That could take anything between sort of a couple of hours or 10, 12 hours plus for any single rescue. So it's not often a quick process. Obviously, anything quick, lifting rubble, just getting people out, walking wounded, that is obviously done by those first responders on the ground. And that's the sort of the process that SARAID goes through. If, for example, we think it might be more support is needed, there's the ability to reach back to the sector coordination cell and the host country to maybe deploy additional teams onto the same work site or deploy heavy capability for that.
Thank you, Mark. Out of curiosity, apart from all the trained teams, including yours, were there also local residents in the region that they were trying to help you in your mission?
Absolutely. There was a local population across the city. Many were sleeping in tents or outside overnight because they were concerned and they were worried about going back to their houses or their apartments if they were showing cracks. And so they were sleeping outside. There were fires burning. They were welcoming. They were supportive. They would offer us food and drink. They were very supportive if we needed to call for silence because we were listening. So it was unbelievable how an extremely busy, congested work site would fall silent. Hundreds of people, excavators would stop, and you could almost hear a pin drop as everybody was waiting to hear if there was a response. There were teams, national response teams, that would help with the digging, the breaking and breaching to sort of support and strengthen the teams that we had. And then there were ambulances. Everybody was there, translators, people to support and help with the rescue efforts, and people were working around the clock. So the overall rescue efforts from the locals was unbelievable, and their resilience was impressive to see and humbling.
You mentioned the significance of maintaining silence to ensure the effectiveness of listening equipment that you use during the rescue operations. Were there any other pieces of equipment or gear that proved to be particularly helpful during your mission?
It's hard to say. There's not one tool that is going to do the whole job for you. It's about having the necessary toolkit that consists of potentially rescue dogs, then the DELSAR search and rescue listening equipment that we have, the 360 camera. There's a lot of different pieces of equipment that need to be used in combination. For example, to use and to utilize these to abstract a casualty. So no one piece will do a job on its own. The two that we used probably extensively in Turkey and that were most useful were the highly sensitive listening equipment for the second rescue that we did on a pretty much pancake structure. There was a clear tapping back that our rescuers heard, and based on that, the local excavator driver was able to delaminate a slab and uncover the hair of a casualty there, a 15-year-old girl called Iqbal, and the team with others were able to establish that she was remarkably fairly unharmed, given that it was 4 or 5 days into the post-disaster. So she'd been trapped under the rubble for nearly 5 days, and it was fairly unbelievable that she was able to be extracted with limited injuries, and that was purely down to the identification from the listening equipment, and then in combination with some propping that a colleague of mine was able to implement, and then stabilize the area to allow the medics to stabilize and extract the casualty.
Okay, thank you. And when you mentioned that you used excavators, shoring, and propping to reach the victims, is there any particular structure or mechanical system, a part of the building or even furniture, which is the most problematic in removing from the rubble and cleaning the way to the victim?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, typically, if they're solid reinforced concrete walls or slabs, then we have the equipment to go through those. It's just a matter of time. Something that was actually important in our decision-making process in Turkey was a radiator. Obviously, a radiator with its rib structure and air gaps and water is not ideal to cut through, and that was what was blocking the path on the first floor to get to the first casualties, Serpa and Hamza. And so a decision was made to actually dig down and go through the basement wall to try to reach the casualties, as opposed to cutting through the radiator itself. So things like that, refrigerators, freezers, washing machines, big pieces of equipment like that can be very difficult if they're needed to go through. So we'll look away and we'll make a decision based on time and ability, we think, to get to the casualties that way. But obviously, because they're big, heavy pieces of equipment, sometimes they are the ones that are stabilizing or holding up the structural elements within a building. So sometimes a way needs to be found.
And this is the place where engineering knowledge and expertise helps.
Absolutely. It's key on that first 360. We're lucky within SARAID now. We've developed a really strong engineering capability with probably over 10 highly qualified civil and structural engineers that have been training in the USAR space, in collapse mechanisms, in understanding how buildings collapse and the best ways to prop, shore, and access and egress those structures as safely as possible. Obviously, you can't remove all the risk. It's an inherently dangerous situation and space that the team are working in. But as far as you can go to mitigate those, we do our best in that area. And the engineers that we have are all very capable and help try to make what is a dangerous job as safe as possibly can.
Thank you, Mark. Were there many cases where you successfully managed to save people under all the rubbles and the collapsed buildings?
So typically the most people to be saved from the rubble are going to happen in the immediate aftermath, often saved by first responders, locals, pulling people out of the rubble. And it's a fantastic effort that they did and that people do respond to immediately. With the rescue teams, I think collectively the international community saved more than 250 people, which is a fantastic effort. Obviously, we'd like that to be higher and to do more. But if you think of the ripple effect with those and the families and the people impacted by those saved people, it's an impressive stat as well. From a personal perspective and SARAID, working closely with that fire, we were lucky enough to help rescue 3 people from the rubble. The first couple on that Wednesday evening, where we arrived and worked for several hours, continuing working with that fire who'd been on that building, but had been there for 24 hours. So when we came to support and take over the rescue operations there, it took a lot of effort with support from the locals, from that fire team, but ultimately were successful in saving a mother and her son, Sirpa and Hamza, which was extremely rewarding. But at the same time, we were conscious that unfortunately she'd also lost her husband and other child in the event, and so it's always bittersweet in that sense.
It's in the bittersweet. I can only imagine how much rewarding this must be, saving a human life. Yeah. I was actually wondering, like, if this mission and your extensive past experience with SARAID has influenced your day-to-day work?
Yes, I think it's impossible for it not to, with what you see out there, and in terms of often everybody, especially engineers, are very used to sort of working on paper, working in CAD, designing things, seeing things being built. And it certainly puts in perspective how vulnerable still we are as a race when major earthquakes occur, and how easily some types of structures can collapse. And I mean, it wasn't just one significant earthquake this time, it was two in very short space within sort of 9 hours of each other, which is not your typical disaster. There was lateral displacements along the fault zone of 2 to 3 meters, which again is pretty significant. And so the design of any structures in those areas is going to face challenges. And so whilst there were certainly evidence of poor workmanship, lack of requirements in seismic design, then there's also often occasions where events will continue to surprise us, and with all the best planning, things will often happen. But I think it's just important to keep the focus, and it keeps reiterating that it's not just a multidisciplinary approach that's required. It's not just something for the engineers to solve alone. It's certainly a more humanitarian response that's required. It's a social, political response that needs to be joined up to help use the engineering skills that the world has and apply them and make sure they're carried through, because it's all very well designing something fantastic on paper, but if it's not implemented, or if it's too expensive to implement on the ground, then it provides little value to those that actually need the solutions. So more has to be done, more is being done. There's a lot of great initiatives out there trying to build seismic resilience at a sort of a grassroots level with the local workmanship to bring them along, because it's no good those developed countries just saying this is how you do it and implement this. It needs to be practical on a scalable level for the local population to respond to it and want to do it as well. So yeah, there's a lot to do, and hopefully the international community can keep working on that way.
That's very good. Yeah, thank you very much. I think you also answered very well the final question I was about to ask you already. Basically, the question would be, what can do as civil engineers to basically improve situations like that in the future? But yeah, you answered that perfectly.
In conclusion, could you please offer some guidance on possible actions that people interested in supporting the SARAID charity can take?
Of course, I mean, SARAID is always looking for support. As I mentioned, we're a relatively small charity. We're a non-governmental organisation, so we don't receive any formal funding. All the money that we need to deploy to maintain our kit, we have to fundraise ourselves or rely on donations. We have some very supportive kit sponsors in terms of First Look, who donated the 360 camera, and Makita, who provide a lot of our power tools. We work with Airlink as a charity. So we have some great support from our partners, but we're always looking to do more fundraising. The team, as I mentioned, comes from all walks of life. Engineers, emergency services, we have builders, we have planners, we have people working in retail, we have people working from all walks of life, experts in coordination. So always looking for volunteers. You don't have to be able to deploy. On every deployment, there's a UK support team, which is vital in helping work with media, logistical support, helping to provide engineering support, remote engineering support as well. So there's a variety of ways people can get involved, and I'd encourage you to have a look at the website, to get in touch. Feel free to drop me a line if you're interested. It is an extensive commitment. It's not for everybody. Certainly, there's an extensive 18-month training program for those who want to be involved in the USAR operations to go through. And it does take a lot of time out of people's lives, but it is at the same time extremely rewarding. The SARAID family is something that I'm very proud to be part of in terms of working closely together as a team. And so I'd actively encourage people to get in touch and offer their support in any way, shape or form.
Of course, we encourage everyone to support SARAID to the best of their capacities. Thank you, Mark, for the discussion. I'm sure that you and your team will bring a lot of help to those in need in future. Thank you once again for your time, and we wish you all the best in all the upcoming missions. Hopefully not too soon.
Well, thank you for taking the time and for listening. Much appreciated.